Come, brother, let us purge the heretics.
So as you probably worked out for yourself, it doesn't actually work yet. If I was a proper YouTuber, I'd have an introduction right here, but I'm not, so I don't. Yes, this is a modified Nerf Nitron into a flamethrower from the Warhammer 40k universe. And as I showed at the beginning of the video, it's not quite functional just yet. I'll talk about that in a moment. The function of this is not all that important because it's supposed to be a cosmetic cosplay piece rather than a functional one. But I do like to have all of my things usable in Nerf games as well, so I'll be making this work eventually. So this has a number of 3D printed components, somewhere in the order of about 20 separate 3D printed pieces, for a total print time of somewhere in the region of 24 hours. So this has taken an awful lot of my time, just in terms of designing and printing components, as well as the epoxy work and various other things that went into making this. We do have the Aquila, which I've used previously on the heavy bolt gun and the las guns. That's not my design. I'll put a link in the description to the Thingiverse page there. This time I have included also the Adeptus Mechanicus symbol on the top. Once again, that's not my design. Again, available on Thingiverse, link in the description. And part of the reason why this doesn't work is the pusher mechanism that I've used, not because the push mechanism is bad, it's actually a really good one, but it doesn't fit this particular build, so I'm going to have to change it. And that's not my design, so that's also in the description. However, all of the other 3D printed components are my own design, and it's based to look like this picture. So I've had to include a barrel, a massive tube to put on the front of the Nitron, a grip, the muzzle piece, and I've also shaped up the back with a 3D printed block, essentially. And that orange thing there, that's the battery door. At the end of the video, I will go through a slideshow of sorts to show all of the different stages of this modification, show you the 3D printed parts that I've designed and that I've used from others, and how it's all gone together. One of the things I love about the Nitron, in fact most of the Vortex series, is that the grip is actually the correct shape for a human being, where most of Nerf's offerings, the trigger's completely in the wrong place for any size of hand, even a child's hand. The Nitron and most of the Vortex series has very thin, long grip with the trigger slightly further forward than the front strap, which is exactly what it should be. And it's the only full auto disc launcher, and because this was supposed to be a flamethrower, shooting full auto darts just didn't seem right. And the kind of different characteristics of the discs, just having them kind of floating around, sort of works for a flamethrower, not really. Also, the Nitron has these kind of bulbous shape sticking out of the side. Now this one's for the flywheel, just one flywheel, not a pair, and this one is for a tensioning wheel, I guess you'd call it. It's much smaller than the flywheel, but it acts on the other side, and that is to give the disc just a little bit of spin as it's coming out of the front of the gun, because that's how the discs actually gain their distinctive flight characteristics, is by having just a little bit of sideways spin. And those shapes actually are very similar to the shapes on the flamethrower, as you saw in that picture. So that's the kind of aesthetics gone over. I do want to talk briefly about the reason why this doesn't work yet. Now, I have promised so many people to make this video today that I actually have had to make it today and not wait until it's finished to do that, which is somewhat of a shame, but I fulfill my promises, and even if it's not kind of what I wanted to do, here's the video. I might do another little video at some point just to do some shooting when I manage to make it work. But getting to the point, the reason why this doesn't work in its current setup. So the problem is that there is a massive dissonance between the capabilities of the flywheel and the capabilities of the pusher system. Now, given that I'm still using the stock motor and stock flywheel, stock flywheel motor and stock flywheel at the front, this takes quite a bit of time to rev up. Even if I've gone from the original 9 volts of a stock Nitron to an 11.1 LiPo, 11.1 nominal, it still takes quite a long time to rev up, and it still takes quite a long time to recover after a disc has been shot. The pusher, on the other hand, is an extremely low gear ratio, which means that it's very, very high speed and fairly low torque. Now, I originally, and you'll see in the pictures at the end of this video as I go through how I built it, I used this motor, the NF183G. Now, this is not a particularly appropriate motor for Nerf. It's good at what it does, but what it does is nothing to do with Nerf. This, when put into the pusher and run normally, actually gave me a fairly sensible rate of fire, kind of what I wanted. Because this is a relatively slow motor, but it had a very high gear ratio in the pusher system, it gave me about the rate of fire I was after, which was great. Unfortunately, when I put it together and tried to shoot it, this motor, combined with the low torque of this motor, combined with the low torque of the gearing system, means that it did not have enough torque to force the disc out of the magazine. Yet, it couldn't push the discs out of the magazine because this motor just doesn't have enough torque, and the gear ratio in the pusher doesn't generate any torque either. So I switched over to a Neo Rhino. I actually used the sort of fixed one from my previous video on repairing motors. This is the good one. Now that had more than enough torque to push the discs from the magazine, and I actually got to shoot it. Unfortunately, a Neo Rhino on a 3S, or even on a 2S, has such a high speed, combined with the extremely high speed of the pusher system, that it was throwing discs into the flywheel fast enough that the flywheel could not keep up. Essentially, as the flywheel's spinning, it spins at a certain speed. And when you put a disc or a dart in, it will lower the speed because kinetic energy is being transferred from the flywheel to the disc or dart as it's shot. And that's how it works. That's how darts get shot. And then it takes an amount of time for it to speed up again. And because this motor isn't particularly high draw and takes a long time to speed up again, it actually hasn't quite got to full speed by the time the next disc comes out. And so it drops in speed, comes up a little bit, and then it drops in speed again because the second disc, and then it comes up a little bit, and it drops in speed again. And by the third or fourth disc, it's just kind of flumping them into the front of the barrel, and it's not actually shooting them anymore because the flywheel has slowed down so much. Which leads me to the fixes for this. And I've asked around for some suggestions, and I've come to kind of 2 ultimate solutions. One is to throw in a bunch of diodes, which I'm told will reduce the speed of the Neo Rhino, but not reduce its torque. Now, I'm not sure how that works because I'm not an electrical engineer and I don't understand motors particularly all that well, but I'll try that and we'll see if that works. It's also been suggested that I use a Rapid Strike pusher box. And as I've shown in another one of my previous videos about 2 and 3 switch setups, I actually have this pusher box from a project that I probably am never going to get back to. So I may as well put this to use. Now, I'm not sure why I didn't use this before, because I knew I had it, and I actually took the decision not to use this for the flamethrower. Even though this is actually slightly smaller than the pusher box I actually used, so it wasn't the size consideration. It might be because I wanted to get that other project working and I didn't want to use this or something else and then not have a pusher for that system. Or it might be that to make it fit in the Nitron, I would have had to have turned over the pusher with its little spring tab and the other block for the third switch. Now that I've cut off the tab for the third switch, I actually can turn that over and mount it this way up, so that probably will work. So yeah, I will be able to get this working. I will have a full auto functioning Flamer Nitron. So that's me talking about the externals and the faults that it currently has. I'm going to now pass over to myself to do a really long bit of talking about the process of building this. And here we are, starting with the Nitron and just taking it apart. And I took the opportunity to take some photographs of all of the insides to make sure that I could put it all back together again. Here's the magazine catch, a blurry picture of the flywheel cage, all of this stuff at the top, and pretty much if you're doing any modification, all of this stuff's getting thrown away anyway, so it's kind of unnecessary. Some of the pusher system. This is actually really important. This is the left hand side of the magazine release, and this part, this double looped piece, and on the right hand side this double loop piece are actually interchangeable. The thumb tab on the outside is reversible if you want a slightly different shape, but then this piece 204 on the left hand side and 301 on the right hand side are not interchangeable. They do have to be the correct way around. And here's all of the screws and where they go. And then of course you chop the thing to bits. So this is a pipe from a steam cleaner. It's a continuous segmented thing, so this end is slightly wider than this end, and I use that so that I could dismantle the flamer and if I ever need to repair it or whatever, so that turned out to be quite handy. The smaller end I cut just a short section off and cut it in half and glued each half to one side of the shell. Just some hot glue in there. That was replaced with epoxy putty. This is 5-minute very hard stuff, and just checking the alignment. And that is then the wider section over the top. Obviously that's far too long, that will get cut down eventually. This is the first 3D component that I designed. This is the front grip, and this has a hole for the orange tube. It's most likely a rapid strike in a barrel, I think. And then just a slight curve at the top, and you can see that's what it looks like printed. But this is a test fit just to make sure that it was actually what I wanted. I went ahead with it. So this is the pusher box that I used, and you can see the motor kind of sticks up at the top, so I had to cut a hole there. And these are a 3D printed pair of 3D printed pieces that go on this side and that side of the shell to cover the motor. Next is the big imposing muzzle piece with a pilot light and a huge bore that's slightly larger than the steam pipe I used. And there's it printed and test fitted. Unfortunately, I measured this hole incorrectly. The orange pipe was supposed to go into here, and the way I measured it was to measure from here on the white pipe to here on the orange pipe, and then when I drew this circle, I measured on the muzzle piece, I drew from there to here to be this distance, and then I centered this hole on that point rather than having the top edge of the circle be that point. So I ended up having to make this extra piece, which is just a correction piece, and that fit in just like that. And here's another test fit, just to have all of the pieces with the motor cover and the rear end, which we'll talk about now. This is the just pieces to replace where I've taken the stock off, and also a hole for the battery door, because that's all going to go back here. That's it printed and fitted with space for, you can't really see it, but there's space for an M3 nut in the back. And here's the battery door itself.
Rather than having two small tabs on the battery door like most Nerf guns will have, I opted for just having one huge lip the entire length because it's going to be stronger that way. Here's all the little pieces sanded down, and the massive gaps in the between my 3D printed parts and the shell filled with epoxy, and this was sanded down as well. Some more work here. And this is the inside of the grip with the same story. And once it all got sanded, that's a grey primer paint. And here's the spray painting done. So I sprayed it silver first, masked it, and then sprayed the red, and I deliberately undersprayed in this area here to give it the kind of silver grip. And then I took all the masking off and painted the wooden pieces. And I also filled in the trigger guard just with a brush paint red, which is why this is actually a different shade. This is a glossy red, and this is a slightly lighter matte red. Here's all the little pieces painted and finished. And this is a test fit of pretty much all of the external pieces. I think that I hadn't put the battery door in at this point, and there's no screws in because I needed to work on the insides.